Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Hard Count podcast. And today, we got fans question and answer fantasy football for you guys today. Any questions you guys asked on my Instagram, go follow that. Link will be in the description. I'll be answering those questions today. Some tough lineup decisions you got to make. Let's get right into it with our first question from Chris. Need a wide receiver 2 and a flex. Options: Michael Gallup, T.Y. Hilton, Devontae Parker, and Devin Singletary. And good question, Chris. Thanks for the question, first of all. I'm going to go with Michael Gallup and T.Y. Hilton. I love good matchups against that Falcons secondary for Michael Gallup. That Falcons secondary is very, very bad. He's getting the matchup with Isaiah Oliver this game. And that Falcons secondary, they supported two top 25 finishes for wide receivers last week. And if it weren't for just one call, which was questionable at the end of the game, Gallup could have had a huge week. And I think all signs are just pointing to Michael Gallup having a great fantasy day. I think he's got real possibility of 100 yards, score, maybe even 2. Started him as a wide receiver 2, got huge upside this week for Michael Gallup. And then T.Y. Hilton, he was a must start for me on my start-him, sit-him for this week. And that's because just the Vikings defense was just terrible week 1. Their cornerbacks are just terrible. I think Phillip Rivers and the Colts are going to take advantage of this. They struggled a little bit last week against Jacksonville, but I think that they're going to really get things together in this Vikings matchup. And T.Y. Hilton still had 9 targets, only 4 receptions, but the efficiency is definitely going to improve this week. Rivers is going to get more comfortable on this team. I think the matchup just provides great opportunity for Hilton to have a breakout week with the Colts. So start him as a wide receiver 2 this week. Chris, start him in your flex. Not a fan of Parker, not a fan of Singletary this week. So yeah, Chris, your answer to that is Gallup and Hilton. I would start both those guys over Devontae Parker and Devin Singletary. All right, next we've got 2 receivers and a flex. Thanks, Jake, for this one. 2 receivers and a flex. Options: James Conner, Robert Woods, Aaron Jones, and Juju Smith, and AJ Green. So we need 2 wide receivers and a flex. Hopefully you didn't start AJ Green. This question was before Thursday Night Football. I do my Q&A on Saturday. I wouldn't have picked AJ Green anyway, but hopefully you didn't start him. Jake, to me, this is an easy one. Start Woods and Juju for the wide receivers. They're both top 10 receivers this week in fantasy. Very promising week 1 performances with Juju's targets in the red zone, just targets overall. His connection with Big Ben seemed to be back. Robert Woods' target share was very, very promising as well. Exactly what we wanted to see from Robert Woods. And so, yeah, those 2 guys start at wide receiver. And then running back, start Aaron Jones in the flex all day over James Conner. I just don't trust James Conner at all. Snell, going to be taking touches away from him. He arguably played better than James Conner in week 1. So there's absolutely no reason for the Steelers to rush Conner back into a role of 15 to 20 carries a game when they can just give the ball to Snell. There's going to be split carries throughout the game. I think James Conner is maybe is an RB3, maybe even an RB4 this week. So it's not even a competition. I'm looking at Jones as an RB2, RB1 this week. He's not going to be seeing like crazy touches, but just the red zone production. He's got a lot of upside just because of the Packers are going to be on the goal line a lot against this Detroit defense, which was just very, very bad last week against Mitch Trubisky and the Bears. So now against Aaron Rodgers and a much better offense, it's going to be a struggle for that Lions defense. So Lions defense, again, they allowed the Bears to rush for 5.3 yards per carry as well. So I just think it's going to be elite performance from Jones this week. He's a good RB1, RB2 option for you. So yeah, the answer to that question, Jake, play Robert Woods, Juju Smith, and Aaron Jones, and you should have a great week in fantasy. Next, we got another question from Jake. Do you see Le'Veon Bell coming back and being productive enough to be on a fantasy football roster? Very interesting question, Jake. And the answer to that is absolutely yes. And I will say it is fair to look at Le'Veon Bell as a guy that is a draft bust. You probably drafted him 3rd, 4th round in your drafts, and he is not living up to that nearly. He's on injured reserve for the Jets. And, I was never very high on him in the first place, but I think people are a little bit too harsh on Le'Veon Bell. Yes, he will be out in until week 5, but do not draft him. He is going to come back. He's going to be a low-end wide receiver 2. Running back 2, high-end running back 3. There's just not too much on that Jets offense that is going to do well. And I think Le'Veon Bell is a bright spot on a talent on that Jets roster that he's going to get carries. He's going to get receptions, especially in half PPR formats. He's going to be viable. Do not drop him. He's looking like a draft bust, but he's a guy that is viable enough in fantasy to start in your flex. If you have weak running backs, maybe your RB2 each week. So do not drop Le'Veon Bell. Keep him in your lineup. He will be gone until week 5, but that's okay. He'll come back and be productive for you because there's not many others on that Jets roster to be productive. Next, we've got interesting question from Evan here. Rest of season, would you have Austin Ekeler or Jonathan Taylor? Very good question. And to me, it's almost a tie. I'm going to give it to Jonathan Taylor slightly. We've seen Austin Ekeler drop down a lot of people's boards drop down a lot of people's rankings a lot. Taylor skyrocketed because of Marlon Mack's torn Achilles. He's going to be out for this season. And I think it's very, very close. And for me, my reasoning behind this is Chargers offense is much worse than that Colts offense is going to be all year. The Chargers offense just looked very, very poor. They're going to be putting up low points every game. They're going to be relying on their defense to win them games this entire year. And I think, don't get me wrong, these guys both are top 10 guys in my opinion for the rest of the year. I think people are a little bit overreacting to Austin Ekeler's week 1. He still had 20 touches. Relax. Yes, his receiving role was diminished. He only got 1 reception all game. But I think that was a lot to do with the fact that it was Taylor's first week in the Chargers system. They were giving the ball to Keenan Allen a lot. And also it was a script that favored just running the ball. That's why he got 19 carries. And I think he still could get a fair amount of carries. And we wanted to see from Ekeler was him getting more volume on the ground as well as in the air. But, there's going to be more games than not where the Chargers are going to be in game scripts that favor throwing the ball to Austin Ekeler much more than they do running the ball with Joshua Kelly. So, and, another reasoning for this is Taylor, I think his role is going to increase as the season continues over Nyheim Hines. I wouldn't be surprised if Ekeler's decreased over the season with Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson in that backfield as well. So I think we're going to be getting improvement from Jonathan Taylor all throughout the year. But, I think just the Ekeler RB by committee, I think I'm a little concerned with both these guys' red zone touches. Ekeler, people are more concerned about for some reason, even though he had 3 and Kelly had 6 versus Taylor having 2 and Nyheim Hines having 4. So I don't see why people are way more concerned about Ekeler's red zone touches than Taylor's red zone touches. And yes, I don't think Nyheim Hines is going to get him all the time. But in games where they're going to be passing the ball a lot more, I think Ekeler is going to have a much more likely chance to get a touchdown. So, again, very, very close. But my reasoning for Jonathan Taylor is just a better offense in general. Rivers has loved to dump the ball off to running backs in general. I wouldn't be surprised if Hines has a decent role in the receiving game. But still, 17 receptions or targets to running backs last week. That's plenty to go around. Jonathan Taylor is going to be a big benefactor from that. And also, again, just a better offense. I think we're going to see his role increase through the year rather than decrease. But both these guys are borderline top 10 guys, top 10 probably for the rest of the year. So I love Jonathan Taylor and Austin Ekeler. I'd probably go with Taylor for the rest of the year. But good question, Evan. Thanks for that one. Next, we got who should I play in the flex? James Conner, Devin Singletary, Michael Gallup, or Latavius Murray. And I think I'm going to cross off Latavius Murray and Devin Singletary here. I know I'm not a big fan of Devin Singletary. I've made it apparent in this video. Devin Singletary, I just think he's so unreliable. We don't know what we're going to get from him. Zach Moss is taking up all those carries in the red zone. His upside is greatly, greatly limited because of that. I just would never feel comfortable really playing Singletary. I told you not to draft him, and here we are. But Michael Gallup, I talked about him earlier. I love the Falcons matchup. I think he's going to be very productive against Isaiah Oliver in that offense, in that Cowboys offense that I think is going to light it up this week off of a little bit of a disappointment starting 0-1. They're going to go to 1-1 this week, I predict. And then we look at Latavius Murray, who is interesting because Michael Thomas is out. Kamara might play a little bit of a receiver role. Latavius Murray might get some carries in the backfield, but I just don't see it. Yes, Latavius Murray had 15 carries last week. It was a game where the Saints almost scored 42 points. They were just getting the ball up and down the field. It's not going to happen again like that. Kamara is going to be getting the carries. Latavius Murray is a guy that you could maybe write in for 10, 11 carries this week. I'm not a huge fan of that because Connor, who is your other option this week, I like more than Latavius Murray. I think, Connor has some upside this week. I'm just too concerned about the fact that the Steelers aren't going to fully utilize him in the offense because they have no need to. They have Benny Snell. He's going to be getting carries a lot this week. We'll see, because Benny Snell was better on his carries last week than James Conner was. And I don't think anyone's really going to debate that. So should be interesting to see James Conner's role. I'm not betting on that. I'm not risking that backfield and seeing what's going to happen. I said that in my stardom sit-em last week. I don't like guys where I'm uncertain about their touches, and it worked out pretty well for me. All of my sit-ems, Antonio Gibson and guys like that, not perform. And I think that's because of the uncertainty. We had no idea what was going to happen. So I don't love Connor this week. I don't like Singletary this week, and I don't like Murray this week. I like Gallup a lot. Start Michael Gallup out of those 4. So, yeah. Next question from Joey. Thanks for this one. Who won this trade? Nick Chubb and A.J. Brown for Miles Sanders. And I will say, I like Miles Sanders more than Nick Chubb. I think he's going to have a big role in that Eagles offense, but we just look at it from top to bottom, and you add A.J. Brown, who is the number 1 receiver for the Titans and is a borderline wide receiver 1, a must-draft guy for me, into that deal. It's a no-brainer. Nick Chubb and A.J. Brown won that all day. We saw Nick Chubb this past week in Cleveland on Thursday Night Football have a very big game. Thanks to him for that, because he's on my fantasy team. But it was definitely promising to me. We saw him get more of the snap share this past week, and I think that's what we're going to see more throughout the rest of the season. Maybe a mix of what we saw week 1 and week 2. But I think, again, we saw in fantasy that these 2 running backs can coexist in this backfield of Cleveland and still put up good fantasy numbers. And I think we can see that through the remainder of the year. I think we're going to see that more and more, where they're both able to support a decent fantasy performance week to week. Miles Sanders, I like a lot. I think he's going to get a lot of touches in Philly. But I think the fact that you have Nick Chubb and A.J. Brown together, packaged, it's not even a debate. So whoever got that trade, congratulations to them. But yeah, so those are my questions. Maybe we can get some more next week. Thank you so much for listening. Go follow my Instagram. Again, if you want to put a question in for next week that I will answer on this podcast. So yeah, thanks so much for listening. Peace.